Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UN Global Compact's Women Empowerment Principles Training. And I'll open up for Professor Oluyemisi to start with opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and participants, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I also say a very big thank you and a welcome to and a thank you to the United Nations Global Compact. It is with great pleasure that I am here today on behalf of the Nigerian Bar Association Women Forum to give the opening remarks at this esteemed and vital workshop, the training on the Women Empowerment Principles, Gender Gap Analysis Tools, hosted by the United Nations Global Compact Network Nigeria in partnership with the Nigerian Bar Association Women Forum. I am particularly delighted because the subject of this training is one that is very close to my heart and to our heart in the Nigerian Bar Association Women Forum. That is women empowerment. Going back in time, the Nigerian Bar Association Forum, which I have the privilege of currently chairing, was initially inaugurated in 2006. However, the fora subsequently fell into abeyance but was resuscitated under the administration of the former NBA president, Mr. Paul Usoro, SAN, in 2019. This was effected in line with the Nigerian Bar Association's recognition of the role of the Nigerian Bar in increasing the active participation of women in the legal profession and national development, as well as the need to connect, advance, empower, and equip women in the legal profession for success, keeping in mind that these factors will contribute to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goal 5 of achieving gender equality and empowering women and girls globally. The present president of the NBA, Mr. Olumide Akpata, has also shown great concern and interest in the cause of the forum. Even before he officially took over as president in August 2019, he showed great interest in our activities. And yesterday at the International Women's Day one-day conference held by the NBAWF, he reiterated his interest and support for the group, and he has shown it. The Nigerian Bar Association Women Forum has various committees set up to execute its objectives, and one of these committees is the External Relations Committee, which has as one of its core mandates the goal to build and strengthen strategic alliances and partnerships and implement projects with relevant stakeholders in alignment with the goals of the NBA Women Forum. According to McKinsey Global Institute, Nigeria's GDP will grow by 23%, or an estimated $229 billion US by 2025, if women have equal participation in the economy. Empowering women in the Nigerian economy and closing the gender gap are therefore key to a thriving economy. Analysts agree that for Nigeria, which is struggling with stagnating economic growth, slow development, and unstable polity, falling standard of living, and weak institutions, a heightened focus on addressing the intersectional gender imbalances that are the main features of these problems may be the master key to unlocking the myriad of opportunities that the country possesses. It is against this background that the NBAWF thought it crucial to provide a platform which offers guidance to businesses, on how to promote gender equality and women's empowerment in the workplace, and to also provide these organizations with the necessary tools and training required to do so, while identifying areas of collective action and peer learning on gender equality and empowerment. We strongly recognize the power of working together to promote emerging practices that advance women's economic empowerment. And so this was and still remains a critical priority for us. The business case for women's empowerment is clear. It benefits everyone, not just women. Also, when the public and private sectors work together for a cause, change happens. So the role of collective action in this cannot be overestimated. Fortunately, we did not have to search too far to drive this agenda because, coincidentally, the United Nations Global Compact Network Nigeria had recently launched its target gender equality initiative in Nigeria, that is gender equality and women's empowerment, and other related SDGs such as SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. SDG 10, reduce inequality within and among countries, and SDG 16, peace, justice, and effective accountability and inclusive institutions. And it was in implementing the Target Gender Equality Initiative that the MBAWF and the UNGCNN agreed to collaborate to administer a virtual training workshop to female lawyers so as to offer guidance to their respective organizations on how to benchmark and assess their gender equality performance using the Women Empowerment Principles, WEP, gap analysis tools. One of the intended outcomes of this program is to ultimately assist with addressing company and law firms' gaps in gender policies and practices, exchanging best practice, and identifying leadership actions to be taken in support of gender equality and the empowerment of women. Participants will also be equipped with the latest data and research supporting the business case for gender equality, and will furthermore gain insight from the United Nations partners and experts on how to accelerate progress on gender equality. But this is just the beginning. We were discussing before this program started, and I'm sure that the partnership, this won't be the one and only one. There will be so many for us to benefit from. As a chairperson of an institution uniquely positioned to command through transformative change for female lawyers in Nigeria, I would like to make a call to action to all key stakeholders to take concerted collective action to develop capacity and support the advancement of gender equality and the empowerment of women. Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. These were the words spoken by the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg 16 years ago, which is still valid in 2021. On behalf of the MBA Women Forum, I bid you all a warm welcome and wish us a successful program as we all join hands today to ensure that the women in this generation and the next are well positioned to play a leading role in their organizations, businesses, their communities, and the economy at large. And to every female listening, as a wise lawyer once said, never doubt that you are valuable and powerful and deserving of every chance and opportunity in the world to pursue and achieve your own dreams. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Oluyemisi, for that awesome welcome remarks. So we'll start today by, let me share my screen. Host, you have to enable me to share my screen. Just give me a second so I can share my screen. Okay, good. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us again. My name is Naomi Nwokolo. I am the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Nigeria. And today we'll be discussing the Women Empowerment Principles and the Gender Gap Analysis Tool. For the interest of those who do not know about the UN Global Compact, I would like to start by introducing the UN Global Compact and our mandate. So in 1999, world leaders met at the World Economic Forum, and there the then Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, proposed to business leaders that they initiate a global compact of shared values between business leaders and the UN, which will give a human face to the global capital markets. There, the United Nations Global Compact was formed in 2000. The UN Global Compact has grown to be the world's largest corporate citizen sustainability initiative. We work with businesses to align their operations with 10 universal principles in the area of human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. For human rights, we call on businesses to respect internationally proclaimed human rights and do not be complicit in human rights abuses of any form. For labor, we ask businesses to respect labor rights and allow for freedom of association. On environment, we call on businesses to innovate friendly environmental technologies to safeguard the environment that their business thrives in. And for anti-corruption, we encourage businesses to ensure that corruption does not exist in anywhere in their business. The UN Global Compact has grown to have over 12,000 businesses committed to our 10 principles across the world. We, as a multi-sectoral organization, we're open to businesses, non-business, academia, and even civil society organizations. We have about 3,000 non-businesses in the UN Global Compact. We are present in about 160 countries, and we have 71 local networks, which you could call country offices, that drive the implementation of the UN Global Compact at the country level. So I'll move now to discuss the Nigerian network. So the UN Global Compact Network Nigeria is one of the 71 local networks of the UN Global Compact in the world and one of the 11 local networks in Africa. We're charged with the mandate of implementing the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact to life in Nigeria by helping our members understand what responsible business practices mean and also help them bring their sustainability commitment to life through implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. This we do in the areas of our 4 pillars: labor, anti-corruption, environment, and human rights. The Global Compact Nigeria has about 145 members, including businesses and non-businesses. And some of the companies we have are Wando PLC, MTN, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Unilever, Lafarge Africa, and a host of other businesses who have really been embedding corporate sustainability in their operations. Now, before we get to the business of the day, which is the Women Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis Tool, I would like us to first of all have an overview of gender equality in the workplace in Africa. If you look at the chart here, you can see that Africa is topping the chart when it comes to women's representation on boards and executive committees. You can see 25% on board and 22% on executive committees, which tops the global average. However, despite the fact that we record success in this, women still find themselves uniquely dispossessed in the workplace and unable to achieve the same level of pay, employment status, protection, and leadership that men enjoy. Now let's take a look at the next slide. From this slide, you can see that it is even more apparent when you look at the gender pay gap. On an average, over 40% of the global wage gap are still to be bridged. For example, you can see Morocco has 278% gender pay gap, which means that if you calculate it, Morocco men earn an average of over $1,449 more than women per month. In Tunisia, the same thing, they have 271%, which means that men earn an average of over $802 more than women per month. Same thing with Nigeria, which has 54%, which could be men earn an average of $206 more than women per month. So same thing with Ghana, Tanzania, and the rest of them. So these issues exist. As much as people are not really talking about it, gender pay inequality exists, and this chart was derived from the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index report in 2020. So these figures highlight not only that women in similar positions as men for seniority and skill levels are still paid less, but also that income disparities are larger than wage gaps. And the difference here is due partially to the fact that women encounter challenges to get to senior roles or to be employed in high reward segments of the economy. Now, a second part of the story is that women are less likely than men to obtain revenues from non-employment activities, such as financial investment or entrepreneurship, where financial gains are substantially higher. And there are also situations where women get refused to collect loans unless they get consent from their husband or unless they're even married. Now, take a look at this slide. Here, wage and salaried workers, and they refer to people who are in a formal employment, while employers' own account workers are considered self-employed. But for contributing workers, there are those who work on family enterprise. So as you can see from the slide, global informal employment, which is a darker shade, and formal employment, the lighter shade, they're kind of relatively equal. When by gender, they're relatively equal. However, in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria inclusive, women predominantly make up the informal employment space, close to 80%, compared to men's 60%. And the margins are even more disparate when looking at women representation as employers. This therefore points to an underrepresentation of women in managerial and high executive positions in the region. Now let's talk about gender equality, the common barriers to gender equality in the workplace. As we've seen in the previous slide, women in Africa disproportionately occupy the informal sector. And although women entrepreneurship across Africa is high, with Ghana being the highest with about 46% of entrepreneurs being women, women business owners are more likely to be in the informal sector rather than the formal economy, where wages and worker protections are higher. So difficulties moving from informal to formal sector also poses a barrier to gender equality in the workplace. And the difficulty here for women business owners and workers to move from the informal to formal sector can be attributed to issues around the fact that jobs that are known to be historically and predominantly occupied by women are not really formally recognized. Also, the lack of equal access to capital, such as investments, business loans, and others for women businesses to help them scale up their businesses and move them to the formal sector is not really available for them, so it poses a threat. Secondly, the unconscious bias. Having few women makers entrenches biases that shows up in the way women are compensated, rewarded, spoken to, and even treated in the workplace. And in addition to the way women's work and accomplishments are viewed, the stereotypes that exist. I'll give an example. In the legal profession, we refer to as gentlemen in skirts. I personally always have my own opinion about that because we are women and we're doing the work. So I don't know why we refer to as gentlemen in skirts. So stereotypes and biases around women's strengths in the workplace often have a way of sidelining women employees and keeping them in administrative and low-paying positions. For example, in Africa and Nigeria, over 60% of women on executive committees have staff rather than line roles in functions where succession and promotion to CEO typically come from. You see the staff roles, they focus on support functions such as human resources and legal, and they have less influence on the strategic direction of companies, including any effort to further gender equality. So at this point, it is also important for us to acknowledge that these biases are not limited to men. Women, both young and advanced, also hold unconscious biases that result in us limiting our own prospects. We become reluctant to take risks. We become reluctant or shy from networking with colleagues and also advocating for our own advancements. There are issues where you hear women are not very skilled at negotiating their salaries. So they just have that unconscious bias in them at the back of their mind. So moving over to lack of flexible working options as a barrier for gender equality in the workplace. If we find out that prior to COVID, and even in these COVID times, because people are still really looking for how to migrate to the new normal, a significant number of workspaces do not account for needs that are specific to women. For example, providing flexible working arrangements and spaces for nursing mothers and women who bear the responsibility of taking care of their family and domestic labor. For example, when a survey was conducted at the United Nations Global Compact, it says only 17% of African companies in the United Nations Global Compact offer flexible working options for employees. And 18% have parental leave, which includes maternity or paternity leave. And companies are typically, and this is because companies are typically more attuned to male needs because of the deep-seated societal and cultural expectations that men be the primary workers and women be the primary caregivers, regardless of whether they have full-time employment or not. And interviewers also have stated that this times anywhere and anytime performance model penalizes women carrying the double burden more than men. In many countries in Africa and also around the world, the assumption that women are largely responsible for caring for children and the elderly and household chores is widespread. And such attitudes are entrenched from childhood. And these are the things that we need to unlearn. Like when a survey was conducted for children in Ivory Coast and Nigeria last year, it was discovered that 68% of boys and 56% of girls think that domestic chores are a woman's responsibility. So imagine growing up with that mindset, it also poses a problem. So these are the things that we need to unlearn moving forward. Finally, on unsafe work environments as a barrier, besides the unconscious biases and others that we have listed, women still face overt discrimination and harassment. In certain cases, it even comes to violence when working in male-dominated industries. For example, mining, extractives, and construction, maybe IT and STEM. And these and other industries where women are disproportionately at personal risks or even being disincentivized from getting the job lead to lack of women occupying these spaces and positions. And many of these opportunities are high-paying jobs. So while businesses may also feel that domestic home life is not an area where they should be involved, we'll be calling on business at this time to really think that domestic violence also affects a woman's advancement in the workplace, because issues of domestic violence and gender-based violence are actually on the increase. Even when COVID happened, there was a high increase of domestic violence in Nigeria, for example. And in Africa as a whole, we know that there's a domestic violence prevalent in about 1 out of 3 females. And violence against women prevents economies from attaining their full potential. It also results in lower growth, lower tax revenue, and greater expenses to health, education.
If we don't do anything until it's perfect.
Could you please put yourself on mute? Thank you. Or host, if you could put everyone on mute. Thank you. So reinforcing the issue is women's high occupation in the informal economy, where they are more exposed to violence and harassment and lack effective measures of representation, protection, and support. So now these are the barriers to the common barriers to gender equality in the workplace. When you find the issue, the next thing is to find the solution. So we have identified the barriers and we'll move forward to discuss how we can address these barriers. So now I want to introduce you to the women empowerment principles. The pre-reads were sent, so I'm sure you have an idea of, of the women empowerment principles. But for those who may not be familiar, the Women Empowerment Principles is a joint initiative of the United Nations Global Compact and UN Women. And they promote a holistic approach to gender equality, helping companies to understand their impacts in the workplace, the marketplace, and the community. In many ways, the Women Empowerment Principles provide a gender lens to the United Nations Global Compact's 10 principles, the principles I mentioned earlier. Because while women's rights are embedded in the human rights and labor principles of the UN Global Compact, the Women Empowerment Principles helps to unpack how businesses can ensure respect for women's rights and support for women and girls. They also, very importantly, emphasize the business case for gender equality, and this was informed by existing corporate practices and inputs from experts across the globe. We are celebrating 10 years of the WEPs because it was launched in 2010, and more than 4,000 business leaders have signed up to a CEO statement of support for the principles, and that is really a first step. So if your company have not really joined the Women Empowerment Principles, I will encourage you to do so maybe after this training. So we'll move to the gender gap analysis tool. So give me your ears for a few minutes while we introduce the gender gap analysis tool. Okay.
The research is clear. Gender.
Let me be sure that you can hear the sound. Okay.
Investing in women and girls is key to advancing sustainable development. If women and men participated equally, the world economy could gain $28 trillion by 2025. The research is clear. Gender equality is an enormous opportunity for businesses to improve their own performance. Companies with at least one woman in senior management tend to see significantly higher annual performance. By closing gender gaps, companies benefit through increased productivity and higher. Investing in women and girls is key to advancing sustainable development. If women and men participated equally, the world economy could gain $28 trillion by 2025. The research is clear. Gender equality is an enormous opportunity for businesses to improve their own performance. Companies with at least one woman in senior management tend to see significantly higher annual performance. By closing gender gaps, companies benefit through increased productivity and higher retention. Investors are increasingly looking at the gender equality performance of companies as an indicator for potential growth. Beyond advancing gender equality and women's empowerment internally, companies can impact all areas of society and be a leader in creating lasting, positive change. Despite this opportunity, many social, economic, and legal barriers for women still exist, preventing them from entering the workforce, progressing in their careers, and growing their businesses. In fact, at the current rate of change, it will take more than 100 years to achieve gender equality. So how can your company accelerate the pace of change? Introducing the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool. It's a self-assessment tool that improves your company's ability to assess current gender equality policies and programs and identify gaps and opportunities for improvement. The WEPS tool is based on the Women's Empowerment Principles, a holistic guidance to businesses on empowering women everywhere, in the workplace, marketplace, and community. More than 190 companies worldwide contributed to its design process. The WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool allows companies everywhere to understand best practices, existing resources, and international standards, driving gender inclusiveness and women's empowerment. The WEPS tool is free, user-friendly, and strictly confidential. By using the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool, your company can assess its strategic approach to gender equality, identify gaps and opportunities for continuous improvement, Learn global gender equality best practices. Benchmark against peers and industry standards. Contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and turn the global goals into local business. Are you ready to lead the change? Don't get left behind. Start your assessment today. Visit www.weps-gapanalysis.org to access the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis tool.
Thank you very much. That was an introduction of the Women Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis Tool. So the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool was actually launched in 2017 to help companies access current policies and programs and highlight areas for improvement and identify opportunities to set future corporate goals and targets. The tool is managed by the UN Global Compact and was developed in partnership with UN Women and IDB Invest, as we've seen in the video. And we also got inputs from businesses and experts around the world. Very importantly to note is that the tool is free and is very confidential. The data you enter into the self-assessment is strictly confidential, and the results will never be linked back to an individual company or divulged to the public. The data will be solely used in its aggregate form to better understand gender equality trends. More than 4,000 companies are now using the tool, and it will please you to know that the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights recommends that businesses use the tool in their recent report on the gender lens to the guiding principles on business and human rights. So we encourage business enterprises to use the tool to help them assess the nature and extent of gender discrimination throughout their operations, as well as the effectiveness of their gender equality measures. Moving over to the benefits of the tool, from here you can see the regions. 10% are using it in North America, Europe 23%, but Africa has the least percent. There has 3%. Australia is in this, but Africa with just 3% of companies in Africa using the tool. So it is a call to action for all of us, business leaders and owners, to start using the gender gap analysis tool. And a key challenge unique to companies and institutions across Africa is the lack of uniform data available to understand, analyze, and contribute to key issues that companies face with sustainable development, such as gender equality. As shown in the slide above, only 3% of African countries are using the gender gap analysis tool, like I stated earlier. So by taking the tool, you're undertaking to participate to increase data and enable the delivery of more effective evidence-based tools and training. And very specific to the needs of the companies in Nigeria, and even at the regional level, it addresses all the needs. So the use of the tool is a collaborative process which enables the development of further tools that will allow progress in advancing gender equality. So we hope that many of you on the call today will take the tool to help to begin to access your gender equality performance. Now, moving over to the methodology of the tool, it is comprised of 18 multiple questions that is spread across 4 teams. They draw questions from good practices from around the world, covering gender equality in leadership, the workplace, the marketplace, and the community. Each question is organized according to a management model which guides companies of all sizes through the process of formally committing, implementing, measuring, and also communicating your progress. The models draws on widely accepted and understood management practices, including that of the United Nations Global Compact. So you can see we have the questions focus on policy development, action and implementation of practices, measuring on policy and practice outcomes, and also reporting, which is a fundamental aspect of the United Nations Global Compact, because members of the UNGC submit an annual communication on progress for us to see what you have done on our 10 principles and also the SDGs. The topics covered in the gender gap analysis tool include commitment to gender pay equality strategy. We have equal pay, recruitment, supporting parents and caregivers, women's health, inclusive sourcing and advocacy for gender equality in communities of operation. And some questions in the tool connect very directly to a company's performance in terms of women's leadership at the board and executive levels. For example, questions related to recruitment policies and practices. Other questions are more indirectly linked, but it will be important to consider as we identify the enabling actions that companies should take in order to make progress on gender equality. At the 2020 UN General Assembly, the Secretary General of the UN stated that no country is yet on track to achieve the SDGs, especially regarding Goal 5, which is gender equality. So it's our hope that this tool will also go a long way in helping you to advance gender equality in your various organizations. So now we'll have to take a look at the tool so we practicalize what we've been talking about. At this point, I'm going to call on my colleague Elizabeth, who is the advisor for the Target Gender Equality Initiative in our New York office, to run us through the tool. Over to you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and welcome everyone. To quickly introduce myself before I hop into the slides. So as Naomi said, I'm Elizabeth and I work at the United Nations Global Compact for the New York office. Right now, I'm actually based in South America, though, in Chile. And I'm also a lawyer myself, and I'm admitted to the New York Bar Association. I used with the Global Compact for around 4 years now. I used to be with the Canadian local network, so another local office of the Global Compact, but since 3 years in New York. In the beginning, focused a lot on decent work and human rights, which of course also provides a really strong and necessary basis for the gender equality work. And now since last year, managing the Target Gender Equality Initiative with local networks all around the world. So really pleased to be here with you and discussing gender equality in the Nigerian context. Later today, I'll have a workshop with Chile and then again with the US. So it's always just really interesting to see also what are the many things that are really the same or very similar across local networks, issues that come up everywhere, such as our unconscious bias that Naomi mentioned. It also resonated in the chat here. But then, of course, many other aspects that are really particular to each local context. So that's also one of the things that the tool helps bring out. I also saw a question in the chat around how you join the Women's Empowerment Initiative of the UN. So with regards to the Women's Empowerment Principles that Naomi already introduced, it's really the CEO's statement of support that your CEO is asked to sign in order to officially sign up to the Women's Empowerment Principles and signal that overall commitment of your company, your firm, to gender equality. I'll run through the tool in a second, so you'll see how to actually join there, so to say, and assess your performance. And then after that, we'll go into more detail of the Target Gender Equality Initiative in particular. So you'll learn how to join there, how it's linked to the Women's Empowerment Principles and the tool itself. I'll briefly share my screen here and take over from Naomi. But basically, also as Naomi already said, we have a lot of companies that completed the tool by now, and she also already shared the geographical split there, but it's also really encouraging always to see that also with regards to company size, it is companies of all sizes. Of course, from smaller companies and SMEs, there's often the hesitance that many of the products developed out there might not equally apply to their context. But with regards to this tool, it's actually almost half of the companies that are under 250 employees that have taken it, as there's so many questions in there that equally apply to SMEs. So it was really developed with that lens to be applicable to both multinationals as well as smaller companies. Also, with regards to industries, we have companies from probably every single industry that have taken it by now. And here on the slide, we've just listed the top 5. What we can also do is that now that we have this breadth and wealth of data, is draw comparisons across different industries, across different groups. And that's also something that we will do in a lot more detail in the Target Gender Equality Initiative if you participate. But to kick us off, I'll run us step by step through the tool. And of course, always encourage you to please keep writing your questions in the chat, as we're happy to answer any of those, so whether it's something more general or really concrete and practical about the tool itself. The very first step is that you go to this website, so webs-gapanalysis.org. As Naomi said, it's available in a few languages now, actually 10 in total. But I assume for most of you, the English one will be the most relevant, but you can easily change it on top here. And you have a lot of general information here. You also have FAQs, so frequently asked questions about the background of the tool, how it was developed, and other things that you might want to know before you even get started. Then you have this tab on top here that says take the WebS tool. So it's really intuitive to go there, and this will lead you to creating an account. As Naomi said, it's a confidential tool. What this means even, and I know we have many legal professionals on the line, it's always a very important question that we do get a lot from companies. It is 100% confidential. It means that even on the back end, so somebody like me that has full access to everything with regards to the database and the back end of the tool, we always only see who created an account in order to help you, for example, reset your password if you can't log in and things like that. But we can never see, even if you've started taking a survey, if your company has completed taking your survey, or what you answered in the specific survey. We're never able to see that for any company in particular. You can only see if and when you created an account. And we can help you delete the account if you would like to do that at some point. What we can also see though is aggregate results. So really just results at the global level of all the thousands of companies together, and results at the aggregate level at the country level. So for example, 4 Nigerian companies that have taken the tool and see the general trends. But also there, we're never able to filter it down to a specific company to say, you answered this, this, and this in this specific question. So always when we talk about results, we're always really just talking about the aggregate results. That's also within the tool in the frequently asked questions, more details that outline that with regards to data privacy and so on, that you might want to share with colleagues before you get started. In general, though, it's really easy. You type in your email. That's the most important part in order to verify your account, get your password reset, and so on. But also always there's an email address in the tool. If there's trouble, if you have questions, you can always message that email address in order to get more details and confirmation on different parts. Then what we have down here, it's quite particular because it's a group code. What that means, and it might be relevant for some of you that, for example, have multinational offices, like offices in other countries, or even offices across the country in different locations. Because what you can do as headquarter company is create a code and share that with your subsidiaries, your local offices, your affiliates. And if your local offices go into the tool using that same code, you will have access to all the results. And that's really a benefit that lots of companies point out to us as being really particular and a great benefit of the tool, as it allows you to not only see your results at headquarter levels and take decisions based on that, but have your knowledge contributed to bottom up from different offices in your country or otherwise across different locations, wherever you'd like to gather that knowledge, so to say. So that's something you can easily create. And there's also instructions within the tool on how to do so, but it's definitely not a must. As many companies just like to take the tool for themselves, take a look, see what it's like. Then once you've entered all of that information on the left, you'll get to the dashboard, which you see on the right here, which basically provides you with, let me go back, the box here in order for you to take the tool. It also lets you download the questions in PDF or Excel format beforehand, which means that maybe you don't want to take the tool right away. Maybe you first want to see what are the actual questions and to get a sense of how long it will take you, who you might need to consult, and so on. So you can download those beforehand. You'll also then here on the right, once you've taken the tool, see your scores, see previous scores, if it's, for example, your second or third time taking the tool, as well as your subsidiary scores if you've used the group code. So now let's see what happens if you click on the button that says take the web tour. As also Naomi said, you'll go to 18 questions that are focused around these different 4 themes that are aligned with the women's empowerment principles. So leadership, workplace, marketplace, and community. As well as each question, each of the 18 is then structured in those 4 management stages of first asking you about the commitment in place. So for example, do you have a policy on gender sensitive marketing and do you have an approach to that? The answer might be no. The answer might also be not yet. So that's also an option always. Then we go into implementation. So different actions that you might be taking, as in, do you have an approach to tackle negative stereotypes in marketing? Then there's also measurement questions. So for example, how are you tracking complaints against gender sensitive marketing to be able to track and measure over time? And then transparency, which is always the questions around what do you actually share with your board? What do you share publicly with other interested stakeholders out there? So it's quite detailed for some of the questions, but of course you can always skip specific answers if you don't know yet or if you don't have an approach to it yet, which is completely fine. As in, the tool doesn't require you to really answer every single option. It allows you to skip certain parts if you don't have an approach there yet. So here you see what I just outlined in more detail. So you see there's usually quite a few options that you can tick. And you will also on the top see a bar in terms of moving you along the line where how far along you are in the tour. But as I said before, it's 18 questions. You also have this little pop-up sometimes that says why this matters, to give you a little bit of more background of what specific things mean. And always when you see something underlined, as you, for example, here in the implementation part, you see for professional networks or specific support for women, you can click on that and have a little pop-up that explains what it means. As we know that probably for some companies or firms that are quite advanced in the gender equality journey, some questions might be really straightforward, but at the same time, for some that might be new to this space, specific concepts might not be as clear, or you might want a little bit more clarification. But in general, questions are really designed to help every type of company, regardless of where you're at in your journey. So also for companies that are really advanced, there's probably many things that you haven't even thought about before that are really easy actions that you could take going forward. So we really hope that the tool inspires you to just get a sense of how can I take a holistic look at gender equality overall. And then at the very end, you get your score. It tells you which category you're in. You see down here, there's 4 categories: beginner, improver, achiever, and leader. And what we always say is definitely don't be discouraged if your score is really low. As to be honest, and I'll show some stats later on, stats are quite low, generally speaking. Why? Because we really designed this tool with all types of actions in mind. So really, how can a company be the most advanced, a truly leading company in the gender equality space that's doing everything they can to advance this issue? So even if you're thinking you're probably doing a lot already, through this tool, you get a sense of, oh, there's actually many more things I could do. So don't be discouraged if your score is low. Definitely, you rather use it as an inspiration for there being so many other options of things that you could be taking going forward. What you'll also see after your score is this heat map of really to see where am I doing well, where am I doing okay, and where am I doing great. So it's gonna split up your different performances for each of the different 4 categories, as well as of each of the different subcategories. You'll see here that by far the most questions are in the workplace category, and there's a lot less in marketplace and community, but still always different spaces for improvement. And it's, as you see, I mean, it's quite a heat map in terms of blue is just letting you know where you're doing great, green is sort of medium, and then it goes from yellow to red. Red is really where you have 0 actions or where you completely, just click no for every single option there. Then, as I said before, you can skip questions, so it will just show up in gray if you didn't respond to a certain question because either you didn't have time or you just didn't have the information yet. What is happening as well after this is that you have another optional part where you can include key performance indicators. So it will ask you, for example, to fill in your women's representation in your workforce compared to male representation, or with regards to accidents reported for the female workforce compared to men. It's another section in the tool that's not influencing the heat map in any way. It's more of a section to help you see and where you're currently at and help you visualize your stats, so to say. What we did last year is publish a report on the key trends and the key different trends and aggregate results that we've been seeing so far from the tool. It's downloadable on the Global Compact webpage, and we're happy to share it in the chat afterwards too, so you can easily access it. And there you have the key breakdown from some of the global stats across the different categories. So it might be interesting to look at that and really see also how companies are faring across the board. I also think here it's, as I said, this really underlines what I said before, as in don't be discouraged if you're doing poorly, if your score is low, and here's sort of the proof for that. On the right, you have this, this chart that tells you that almost half of the companies are beginners, as in there's 46% of companies that are in the beginner category. After that, there's 39% that are in the improver category, 13 that are achievers, so that have over 50% of answers answered yes to, and only 2% that are leaders. So out of that, I think we have 3,000 companies that fully completed the whole tool. It's 2%, so it's 60 companies that are in this leader category. So it's really, really low, which is completely fine. As I said before, we are, of course, hoping that scores improve over time, but at the same time, really want this to be an encouragement for everyone to see what other actions there are out there that you could take. Also on the left here, we have the breakdown for the different 4 categories, where you'll see that companies are performing slightly better in the leadership and workplace categories, and a lot lower in the marketplace category. Marketplace really is around supply chain, around women-owned businesses and supporting them, as well as marketing practices and things like that. And for the community, there's of course different CSR practices you can take, consultations, projects, and so on. So for that category, also scores are slightly lower. I think it's also always super interesting to see which data do we not have. And the most skipped question is always, regardless of which region you go to, which is the global data, which is the data in a specific country, always question 13 on women's own businesses and support for them, which of course is a really crucial part to advancing gender equality, as we all know that women-owned businesses get a lot less financial support or support overall in order to launch their business and in order for it to be included in global supply chains. It might be that there's really little guidance out there still, as in we still even don't have a globally acknowledged definition of what is a woman-owned business. When do you count as women-owned businesses for a supply chain purpose? But it also just shows that there's lots of more work to be done within this space as well, to really support companies in how do you include women-owned businesses in your supply chain? How are you proactive about this? And how do you support women-owned businesses beyond that, whether it's through financial support or training, capacity building, or even guidance on legal documents, for example. So yeah, I've done aggregate results in so many countries over the past year through the Target Gender Equality Initiative. And really this question always stays the same with regards to there not being any guidance out there. And it's always the most skipped question. Then I just wanted to give you 2 snapshots of 2 other topics and show you the global aggregate results for those. That said, in the Target Gender Equality Initiative, if you sign up to that, we'll go into a lot more detail on all of the aggregate results across so many other areas too, and really break them down for Nigeria specifically as well. Here, the stats are really referring to the global stats. I always think parental leave is just such an interesting area, as of course it's such an obvious action companies can take that really could level the playing field for women at the workplace. As we see, most women, as also Naomi pointed out before, drop out of the workforce after having their first child. Here, just to explain some of the stats, we see that 66% of companies communicate the maternity leave policies to all employees. This doesn't mean companies that have maternity policy in general, as often that's mandated by legislation, but rather who communicates it, so who's really proactive about it. So that number, I would say, is fairly high. Of course, there's a lot of room to improve still, but it's at the higher end. But then only 24% of companies track the effectiveness of their approach. So how many women actually return to work after taking the maternity leave? As Naomi said, and that's the biggest gap that we have in terms of women dropping out of the workforce after having their first children. So if you're not even tracking that at all, if you're not even seeing how big is the gap for your own company, you don't even know how big the problem actually is or where you should start in order to take action. And then only 16% of companies are consulting with their employees to see if the benefits offered actually meet their needs. So that real life check. And that's a really small number as well. As in, you can do many great things, but if you don't regularly check in with your employees in terms of, is it working, then you might have lots of wasted resources. And here, actually, we do see in general that bigger companies and multinational companies often perform better when it comes to having the commitment in place, so having policies and having formal processes in place. But some of these numbers, like this consultation number here, actually SMEs usually perform a lot better in that space. So they really have a lot more of this constant feedback loop going on. So it's definitely something to learn from SMEs as well. On the right, we have similar numbers when it comes to paternity leave. So males taking paternity leave in order to support their children or their working mothers as well. So companies that communicate their approach, it's a little bit lower, the number here. And then the second number is, it's definitely not the same as with regards to on the left, but it's even a step beforehand. So how many companies actually track the number of men that take paternity leave? So it's less than half. So there we can say that half of the companies don't even know how many male colleagues take paternity leave. So they don't even know if a problem exists or not, if they need to do more, or if it's actually something that's used by their workforce. And then the number on the right is again very, very low. It's 70% of companies that provide incentives to encourage men to take the paternity leave. And there, that's a gap that we're seeing hugely, and that always comes up in our workshops and discussions, as in paternity leave and benefits do exist on paper, but there's just so many stereotypes around it for men to not be willing to take the maternity leave, as it might be looked upon weirdly in the companies. They might not feel comfortable. They feel like there's a financial disadvantage if they do so, or they don't even think about it. They don't even know it properly exists. And there is, of course, many little incentives a company can take, as in if you're a male leader, if you're a male boss, if you're the CEO, if your wife is having a child, just take the paternity leave yourself in order to signal to your workforce that it's okay to do so. Or if you're a team leader, take it yourself and encourage your other male colleagues to do the same. As well as there's lots of marketing campaigns or communication campaigns companies have been doing to really showcase or interview, for example, male colleagues that have taken the leave to really show the benefits they've had in terms of bonding with their children and improving their family life, and also just showcasing that there's no repercussions afterwards if you return to the workforce. So that's definitely numbers that we're always really interested in seeing, and they differ a little bit from country to country, as of course always the baseline depends a bit on what is the legislation in the specific country. For example, just a few weeks ago, I had a workshop in Bangladesh, and there is no legal paternity leave. So that's why almost all companies just either skip the question or answer no, because it's not legally required to offer the paternity leave. So very little companies opt to do so. Then I have another question here that I pulled out aggregate results for us. It's always of great interest, which is violence, sexual harassment, and exploitation. In general, what you can say with regards to every single question is that stats decrease and numbers decrease between the commitment, so the policies, then the implementation, and then measurement and transparency. So those 4 commitment stages. Commitment is always quite high, but then when it comes to implementation, measurement, and transparencies, numbers are usually a lot lower. So really the gap between commitment and action. When it comes to violence and harassment, we see that 73% of companies have a standalone policy in place. So a zero tolerance policy, for example, for violence at work. We also see that lots of companies, so almost all of those, also have confidential grievance mechanism in place in order to resolve issues when they come up. And also there, I mean, of course, the number is still quite high, but that also means that 8% of companies that have a policy in place didn't even think about grievance mechanism. So they put a policy out there, but it's probably quite empty as they didn't even think about that next step. But then what we do also see here is that only 41% of companies track the number of grievances related to workplace violence disaggregated by sex. So if you're not disaggregating by sex, of course, you're not able to see if there's a gender problem, if there's a gender gap in that space, if there's more that needs to be done. And then here we have an implementation action. So annual training to all your employees on your policy. So actually showcasing what does your policy mean in practice. And there it's only half of the companies that have a policy in place that provide annual training. So a lot that have the policy out there without little follow-up action. And then when it comes to another action, so domestic violence, which is of course a topic that was in the spotlight a lot more throughout the past year during the COVID pandemic as numbers increased everywhere, shockingly. We see that 35% of companies provide confidential support to victims of domestic violence. So that's a number that hopefully is going to increase now that the topic is a little bit more in the spotlight, but still very, very low and of course not meeting the needs out there. We have, even when it comes to violence and harassment, there's lots of more sub-actions, sub-questions that are pointed out in the tool. So this is really just a snapshot to give you a sense of that gap that I was mentioning between the commitment in place and the follow-up actions that companies could take. So I'll stop here with regards to the tool, and we have a few questions on this slide here just to maybe reflect for you a little bit with regards to has your company taken a gender equality assessment in the past, or would this be the first one that your company is taken? We also encourage all companies to take this Webb's gender gap analysis tool not once, but maybe on a regular basis, such as annually or so, to see how their performance improved over time. And of course, we're always really keen to hear if you're taking this assessment, if you've taken others before, what are the areas we could improve? What's areas that you feel like are maybe missing from the tool? And then also, as we pointed out, the variety of questions before, who within your company do you think maybe needs to be consulted in order for you to be able to properly answer their questions? So it might not be that you have all the answers by yourself, but for example, maybe you have to reach out to a colleague in procurement with regards to the supply chain questions, or in marketing when it comes to gender sensitive marketing, as you might not have all that knowledge on top of your mind, which is 100% normal. And then lastly, after then you think, once you see your dashboard and the heat map of where you're doing well, where you might be doing not as well, what do you think the next steps would be? As of course, ideally the tool is a starting point to help you see, of course, where you're doing great and where other opportunities for improvement are, and for you to really see what does holistic action on gender equality look like? What's the many different ways there are and actions you could be taking? But ideally, of course, this would be the first step. And then the next step would be for you to actually take action in one form or the other. I'll also stop here and see if there's question in the chat or anything like that. I don't think I can see it while sharing my screen. And afterwards, we can get into more details on the Target Gender Equality Initiative. more broadly. Naomi, I don't know if there's any questions or anything like that, or if you'd like to open the floor to anyone in particular.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for the discussion so far. There's no question on the chat here, so I'll still be asking. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Please, you could raise your hand, and either you drop it on the chat, or if you want to ask, you can raise your hand and I will give you access to speak. Okay, we have a hand raised from here. So, okay, go ahead. I just allowed someone to speak. Please go ahead. Okay, someone is joining us to ask the question. Please go ahead and ask your question. Dr. Bukola. Unmute yourself, please. Dr. Bukola, please unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Okay, let's get someone else.
Yeah, so a question in the chat around whether that tool is available already, and it definitely is. We've been having it for around 3 years, so it's always publicly available on the web page that we mentioned in the beginning, and that we can definitely share again via email or so after the call with everyone that attended, and we can also pop the link into the chat. But you can easily just go to that website and start taking the tool right away, so that there's no other sign up or anything like that needed. It's not limited to only web signatories, for example. It's really open to absolutely everyone that's interested in taking it.
Ajunos, I'm trying to let people speak, but I'm not hearing them. So if I've allowed you to speak, please feel free to ask your question, and others, please drop it in the chat. Please drop your questions in the chat. I don't know what the problem is. Elizabeth, maybe you could just go ahead and then we'll come back to those who have questions.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll continue, but feel free to write things in the chat or unmute yourself whenever it works and interrupt me while I'm speaking too. That's no problem either. But yeah, so for us, I guess the next step is also answering the third question here with regards to what do you think the next step would be? So that's kind of why we launched Target Gender Equality. So the specific initiative that we're also going to talk about now to really help companies move from commitment to actionable and measurable outcomes. So I'll show a few more slides here in terms of how we came about this initiative, what we're actually doing, and then in the end on how you can sign up to it in order to join. Basically, it's really focused on the first dimension of the women's empowerment principles. So women's representation and leadership. And here I think the slide speaks for itself with regards to why are we still even talking about women's representation and leadership as the overall theme. It's definitely clear that there's been lots of years of activism initiatives, whether it's global ones or local efforts and articles and research academically or in other ways on that there is a huge gap for gender equality. And I think in the WEBS video that we showed before, they were saying it's going to take 100 years to close the gender gap. Actually, the updated numbers from last year are that it's 257 years to close the economic gender gap. So the years actually doubled since the time of when the video came out, which was just a year before then. So it's definitely, yeah, way too long and of time in order to make progress happen. And what the Secretary General of the UN also always says is that gender inequality is the overwhelming injustice of our age and the biggest human rights challenge. So of course, we always primarily talk about gender equality being a human rights imperative. And in order for your companies to respect human rights, you have to advance gender equality and make sure no discrimination exists. In addition, of course, the COVID crisis of last year really pointed out all these different gaps, all these issues with regards to women being disproportionately affected and risking that the progress we've made, so the limited progress with regards to some areas of gender equality, whether it's workforce participation or education or maternal health or women's health overall, risks being reversed. And lots of women, for example, the gender pay gap is increasing in times of COVID, or women are the first ones to now drop out of the workforce, given their increased care responsibilities in times of crisis. So, of course, though, what we also always point out is that it's presented us with a chance to disrupt those gender stereotypes and to showcase that leadership as well as decision-making can and should be shared responsibilities. And I'm sure you've all seen this tagline before with regards to building back better and building back more gender inclusive. So that's sort of how and when we launched Target Gender Equality, as we launched it last March, so right in the middle when the pandemic hit. However, though, of course, given all the crises that unfolded throughout the years, it really showed companies that being an inclusive company, launching an inclusive workplace and putting proactive work behind that really puts you on the forefront of the issues, really helps you weather crises more proactively and more smoothly when it comes to it. The Target Gender Equality is really focused on accelerating progress as we need it, and setting and meeting ambitious targets for women's representation and leadership. So instead of only having a policy out there, which is of course also a necessary step in many regards with regards to putting on paper what you want to do, signaling the right issues and just having an overall framework, it really is also about proactive actions and measurable actions. So in the first round, which launched last March and is coming to an end right now, we engaged over 300 companies, counting over 8 million employees in 19 countries, with the program really guided at the national level, so at the local level by Global Compact local networks. Last year, so over this year, we had around 40% of the companies being multinational companies, but actually they're not only headquarters, but mostly local offices or subsidiaries, as well as quite a few bigger national companies, but also around a quarter or so SMEs. So it was really good to see that the program resonated with companies alike. So that's also really one of the strengths of the programs, that it brings companies of all sizes and sectors together in order to jointly move the needle for gender equality. The program also so to say, implements the women's empowerment principles as it implements the first dimension of gender equality on leadership. So building on all of the learnings from last year and refining the program, so to say, we're excited that we're doubling in scope this year, as the program is going to be offered in 45 countries in its second round, where we're able to really build on all the learnings from the first year as well. So what does it actually do? We're calling for gender balance at the board level and executive management level. So really trying to zoom in those layers to set ambitious targets in that space to equal the playing field, so to say. Of course, that's directly driving Sustainable Development Goal 5.5, which is about full participation, equal opportunities for leadership by 2030. And as I said just now, it advances and directly supports the women empowerment principles. There's different components of the program, so performance analysis, capacity building, action dialogues, and advocacy. And I'll go through all of those in a little bit more detail in a second now. What we also say, of course, it's about the human rights imperative, but we are going to unpack many different arguments that will help you make the case to your company's management, for example, on why this is an imperative and why more action needs to be taken. And one of those is, of course, always the business case with regards to what we are seeing. So more and more studies, and there's really being more completed every month, it seems, that companies with high female representation have better annual returns financially, as well as perform better when it comes to sustainability. So their ESG performance with regards to, for example, lower greenhouse gas emissions or reduced incidences of fraud. And we're happy to share more of these studies, but we're really unpacking it in a lot of detail within the Target Gender Equality program itself as well. Then the first part of the program actually starts with the Web's Gender Gap Analysis tool. If you're already taking it now, that's completely fine too, then you're a little bit ahead in the program. But we're also asking everyone that's participating in the program to take the tool. And then we're going through the aggregate results in a lot of detail to really see where is Nigeria at, where is your group of companies, the group of companies participating in Nigeria in the program at with regards to the overall trends, where are SMEs performing better or worse, for example, where do certain sectors maybe perform better or worse, as well as how does it compare to the international standards, to your regional standards, and so on, to really provide you with a set of data that will help you make the case for why you should take urgent action and in which areas you should get started, where your biggest gaps or opportunities lie. And then the meat of the program, the core, is a series of capacity building workshops. The first one really focused on how do you even set targets, what's the guidelines for setting targets in the diversity space, as well as what does ambitious mean in terms of if you're a construction company and your current workforce is only 5% of women, of course you can't by the next year already aim for 50% women. It's something that really depends on your context, as well as locally, as well as in your industry. So we're really going to talk through what's ambitious, but what's also realistic and what's needed in order to drive the sustainable development goals. In the second workshop, we're talking about strategies for success. What this means is that you've probably, and also as you'll see in the tool, have lots of gender equality efforts in place already. You probably have a zero tolerance for violence policy. You might have a project working with schools in underprivileged areas. You might have an approach to closing the gender pay gap. How do you take all these pieces you already have, all these different programs, as well as add additional programs, but really build them into a holistic strategy that's going to help you advance your overarching targets and objectives of where you want to be in the space. As in, for example, we do see lots of companies that are doing great work that speak at conferences about their efforts where you think, wow, they're really doing great stuff. But then you go to their webpage with regards to what does their board look like? What does their top management look like? And you still see all male faces. So then for me, it's often like I'm thinking, wow, they're really doing lots of great things, but it doesn't change anything at the top level. So these workshops really help you package all the different things and break down to that glass ceiling, to the top level. The last workshop is focused on measuring, but also communicating your progress, making sure everything you do is actually accountable and there's accountability strategies built in with it, as well as thinking through what do I want to publicly communicate? What's the benefits of that? And is there also pieces that maybe I don't want to publicly communicate, but I have to communicate to my employees, for example. We've also developed an action planning guide that helps company reflect on each of the pieces after each workshop and build the thread, so to say, from workshop to workshop. And then there's lots of other additional global, local, and regional learning opportunities for companies to dive deeper into other topics that are of interest. Here on the slide, we have a picture from a workshop that our Mexican local network did on the violence against women, for example, on the International Day for that. So to really dive deeper into how do my sexual harassment efforts relate to the overall strategy and efforts. And so also, as I said before, while the overall topic is women's representation and leadership, it's really about a holistic approach. So we're not only talking about targets for representation and diversity, but really unpacking so many of the other issues as well, as all of these are drivers in order to break down barriers and to achieve your overall targets there. And then at the end of the program, we're also organizing action dialogues, which are multi-stakeholder events where government, civil society representatives, and so on come together with the companies, as we do acknowledge that many of the things that we're doing within the program, of course, can't be solved by companies by themselves. Of course, there's lots of things that companies can and should be doing, but there's some things that just depend on the overall enabling environment, and there's a broader approach that needs to be taken when it comes, for example, to tackling stereotypes within society and really breaking down that macho or masculine culture to ensure it's inclusive and able for women to thrive. It's something that, yeah, a company can't tackle by itself, but it has a leading role to play. And then there's also a strong advocacy component, of course, that relates to that directly too. So all of our local networks, as well as many of our other partners we're working with, are really constantly working on an overall global campaign to drive the narrative, to really advocate not only for the company itself to change its actions, but also how can others follow its course. We also have a newsletter, a LinkedIn group, and different specific things like that where companies can engage in and connect with their peers across other countries too. So here you have the map of the countries that are driving the initiative this year. So in Nigeria, it's going to be offered, as well as several other African countries, but all across other regions too. Which means that, as I said before, some of the workshops, so the main workshops are taking place locally in order to really be able to unpack local dimensions, be able to be a small group so that you're really confident and able to speak up, to share your own solutions already and learn from peers. But many of the other opportunities are offered regionally or globally, and there's different ways for you to connect with your peers in other countries as well. We're also every March, and just now we had it, organizing a global online event called Target Gender Equality Live, where companies can showcase their efforts and where you can get together with companies from all around the world. So maybe some of you were already able to join us there, but we're organizing it again next March to finalize the end of the next round for really companies to showcase what they've been doing and keep learning at a global level as well. And here we just have a picture of lots of the people engaged throughout the countries that are driving target gender equality. It's not just me at the headquarter level of the UN Global Compact, but lots of local networks that are engaged. And this slide is just done last year, so by the 19 countries that participated. But now as we're expanding to 45, there's lots of more faces to add here, including Naomi's, for example. And what we're also really lucky about is that we're not by ourselves. We do acknowledge that there's lots of great organizations out there that have strong expertise on gender equality. And we do want to build on everything that's out there and be able to connect you as companies with all that knowledge out there as well. So that's why we formed a global coalition of gender equality experts from all these different organizations. So it's UN organizations like UN Women, UNICEF, the ILO, but also some governments, like for example, from the UK or Spain, as well as lots of civil society actors in the space, for example, the Commonwealth Business Women's Network or the 30% Club that really has strong expertise on target setting, as well as other advocacy organizations. So they are able to join us in different workshops to share their latest resources, their latest practical tools as well. And you're going to be connected with many of them through different opportunities throughout the year. Many opportunities are going to be optional, while others, such as the workshops, are more of the mandatory program, so to say. And here, just in summary, a quick timeline with regards to what's happening when. We just opened the company sign up. So which means that starting now, you can go to the global website of the UN Global Compact and sign up to the Target Gender Equality Program with your company. You're going to fill in your name, you're going to sign up 2 representatives, which are going to be your core contact focal points for this initiative. And you have until around June, until the end of June, to sign up to the initiative. Then you're going to join an onboarding webinar locally, as well as go through the performance analysis of the WEBS tool, but also then discuss in detail, as I said, the aggregate results. And then starting around October or so, there's going to be those 3 capacity building workshops, as well as lots of other optional voluntary opportunities that I don't have on this slide right now, as they'll depend on what you're interested in and what we might be doing specifically for your region or globally. And then towards the end of the program, we are organizing action dialogues. So a local one for Nigeria or regionally for Africa, or even some global opportunities to get together. Of course, with regards to global, it's lots of companies that are going to be participating in the program throughout the next year. So we want to make sure that there's some opportunities in smaller groups where you're really able to openly share and discuss, as well as more broader learning opportunities as well. So that's it with regards to the slides and with regards to Target Gender Equality. I'm leaving you here with a quote from our CEO, Sander, which is around when women are empowered, everybody benefits. As in, of course, there's a human rights imperative, but it's also, really clear on why there needs to be action taken on gender equality. I'll stop here and happy to answer any other questions on the program, on the tool specifically, but I really encourage everyone to go to our website, as there is where you can sign up. There's also where you'll have a document with frequently asked questions about the program. So lots of these practical things in terms of who should I choose as my representative, or how much time should I invest in this, or things like that. But happy to also take any of these questions now. And I see there's one question here on the Q&A document. And I think the question is mostly about action between male and females, right? As in also encouraging men to become male allies for gender equality, and this not being a women's issue, but really being an issue for everyone. Yeah, so that's why also that's why we talk about gender equality as well, and not just women's empowerment, so to say, right? As it's a question to balance between the both genders. So also, for example, when it comes to this program, we really encourage everyone to also nominate male representatives, to have a male and female representative participate in the program, to really ensure it's not something that only women participate in because it's their issue, but it's really an issue for the company overall. And also within the workshop, we are talking a lot about potential backlash. How can you communicate about gender equality? How can you especially also get male employees to come on board and to advocate for this as an issue for everyone? And it's, for example, in some companies, is actually not about women's representation in leadership, but it's also about male representation and leadership, as there are some industries that are really female dominated as well. There's, for example, in Indonesia, where we're running the program, a few companies that are actually using the program to also look at targets for male representation even. But at the same time, in the workshops, you'll see it's not only about women's representation, but it's, as we always say, about diversity overall. Main benefits kick in not only if you have 100% women on your board, but actually if you have diversity of thought. If you have a balance between people from all types of backgrounds and all types of different education or and diversity of thought, so to say. So that's when different benefits of diversity can come in, and all the benefits that we pointed out before. But I think somebody just unmuted themselves, so there might be some other questions in the chat.
Elizabeth.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the chair of the NBAWF. From this presentation, I can see that while this training is very important for our young female lawyers, most of them that are here, we also feel that this will be very relevant to our senior female lawyers, especially those who are partners or those who are striving to be or aiming to be partners in the different firms. I'm saying this because many of the things that I can see on this slide will be relevant to people who are partners, who have a hold on their companies and who, or their law firms, who should know that there should be gender equality. And this also will be important in the academia for the seniors, the deans, the heads of departments who will want to encourage, and people in the middle cadre. So I'm just thinking, well, we can talk about this with Naomi, that can we have another training? If not, how can this cadre of people be brought in to know what we've just talked about now? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I mean, definitely leaving it up to Naomi to also see what's best with regards to organizing. But in general, yeah, with regards to the program, what we do with regards to sign up of specific companies is that you sign up representatives that are usually at the working level and are going to take different decisions and actions forward. But we also ask each company to identify one ambassador to sign up, which is usually a person that's either C-suite themselves or a partner themselves or a direct reporting line to the top management, in order to ensure that from the very beginning, it's not just a little side project that one person within the company does, but rather there's interest and acknowledgement of this from the very start from someone in more top level as well. And that whichever learnings come out and whichever actions are going to be identified also can more easily be taken forward afterwards. Also last year within the first round, we did have quite a lot of law firms that participated in the program in almost every country. So of course, it's a mix of industries and sectors that participate. And we also always see that as a benefit. So you can learn from solutions across industries, but there's quite a lot of lawyers engaged as well and people in the legal industry. But even when it comes to your specific law firm, of course, it would be great for some lawyers to engage. But for example, if you sign up with your law firm, maybe you can sign up as a representative as in your legal capacity, but you could also invite someone from the marketing team that many of you might have to join as well, to make sure it's a cross effort across different departments as well. But maybe Naomi, you want to jump in with regards to other opportunities or plans that you're organizing. And I know we are recording this as well, so we can easily share this too.
Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you. I was just going to add that we'll share the recording on our YouTube channel and then send the link to the MBA Women Forum. So the senior women in the forum may want to go through the recording and see how they can benefit from it. And if they have to engage us after, we are also very much available to take that partnership forward.
Oh, that's fantastic. We'll appreciate that. That's good. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Prof. And also I see a question from Victoria Obedin. I know we spoke earlier about this webinar, so thank you for joining us. How can Women Group of Lagos Chamber of Commerce work with you? Okay, great. So we will still, like I said, we're going to share the recording and we call on you to join the Target Gender Equality Initiative, because it's really broad and it will be very interesting to have you join us. So first things first, I think after the call, we're going to have a conversation, maybe via email or on the phone. And Elizabeth has also shown you how to sign up. So you can also sign up. You can circulate this to your members, and those who want to also be members of the UN Global Compact can also engage us to see how they can benefit from all the other tools and pool of resources that we have available for you, for women, and for implementing the SDGs as a whole as regards our principles and the SDGs we work on. So more questions if you have.
Yeah, there's one other question in the Q&A section here around tools for female entrepreneurs, or in which way this is relevant for female entrepreneurs as well. So dare to say, firstly, there's also lots of women-owned businesses that actively sign up for target gender equality. Because I think something that we also see is just because you're a woman or because you're a female CEO doesn't necessarily mean that your company is actively advancing gender equality. As also was pointed out before, it's not a women's issue, it's an everyone's issue. And just because of the fact that you're a woman, you might still not be exploring all the different options that there are for your company to be truly gender inclusive, gender equal, and be advancing the topic. So we do have lots of female entrepreneurs that with their companies actively sign up to target gender equality to learn, of course, the end goal of women's representation and leadership. But as I said before, we're unpacking so many other issues within the workshops to really see how you can proactively and holistically take action for gender equality. But then, for example, also within the tools, there's questions around procurement, there's questions around support for women in businesses and so on. So we're also always trying to proactively point out to other companies, where can you take actions for women entrepreneurs to improve their participation in supply chains and so on. And there's a few different other activities that the Global Compact engages in with regards to women entrepreneurship, developing tools and resources for them. So I'll stop sharing my slides in a second so I can pop a few links into the chat afterwards. But it's definitely a topic that we're also hoping to take on a lot more proactively going forward too. But I think the very first part there is that also as a female-owned business, it might be a great solution for you to participate in the program, and also to, for example, amplify the advocacy efforts that we're doing to really showcase what the narrative is, and join the movement, so to say, and join different campaigns and advocate for the issues out there to amplify your voice. I don't know if there's any other questions. I don't see any right now. I'll stop sharing my screen for now, but I can always go back to it afterwards too. So the first link that I'm gonna pop here on the chat is the Web's Gender Gap Analysis tool that we talked about in a lot of detail before. And then I'll also pop in the link to the global web page, which is the one that has all the details on target gender equality, so on the initiative itself. So there you'll be able to scroll down and you'll be able to download a frequently asked question document. You'll see which are the other countries where you could sign up. So for example, if your firm not only has an office in Nigeria, but also has offices somewhere else, you might want to sign up to the program in both countries or in 3 countries or so, in order to compare your learnings and then set overarching, more global goals, so to say. And then the last thing I'm gonna pop in the chat is also a newsletter that we have globally for target gender equality, which informs you about all the latest developments, other types of global opportunities and so on, as well as share stories of individual women, case studies and that. So also always encourage you to sign up for the newsletter so you can stay on top of everything over the next few months, as we do acknowledge that for many, you won't be able to sign up to the initiative today, as of course it requires sign off maybe by your supervisor or different discussions in terms of who might be best placed to participate and so on. And I'll also pop my email address here too, as of course, Naomi is going to be best placed to answer many questions about everything going on in Nigeria, specifically how you're going to shape the program, when you might be organizing next opportunities. But if there's questions around, for example, another country that you'd want to sign up in, or even just technical questions on the tool, or you can't access the sign up sheet or anything like that, you can also always email me, and happy to point you towards the right things there.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your wonderful presentation. And thank you for taking the time to join us. I know it was 7 a.m. in Chile when I asked you to join us.
No problem. I'm bright and early and very fresh to start my day now.
Thank you for the sacrifice. That's the issue we have to do with time zones and commitments. So I really appreciate that. And for our audience, I don't know if there's still, I can see questions still dropping. Okay, they're your chats. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us on this training today. We urge you to join us. Can this be sent? Okay, yeah, it can. She's talking about the links. Yes, we can send that. Okay. Okay, great. So thank you for taking the time to join us today on this initiative. We hope that you have learned a lot and it was really insightful. We urge everyone to continue to play their parts in advancing gender equality in their both personal and corporate capacity. If you're interested in knowing about the UN Global Compact, please feel free to reach out to me, Victor, or Elizabeth, and we'll be very available to respond to you. Thanks again. The recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, and the links will be shared to all participants, so you can always go there to view it. And yeah, so thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and thanks everyone on the line.
Thank you. Bye.